Welcome to Session 5. In this session, David will be talking you through two very important parts of the training: surviving hostage situations and minimizing sexual assault. For many groups, this session covers some of the most difficult subject matter in the training. We want to remind you that this training is not designed to scare you in any way, but instead to prepare you in the case that something should ever happen. According to David, the chances of this occurring are very remote, but as they do occur, we need to strategize and be prepared as part of good stewardship.
Welcome back. Our next section is on a little bit heavier subject, but there's some good news in this subject. We're going to talk about surviving capture. And that capture, by capture, I don't just mean the guy who gets kidnapped and is permanently held. Capture could be the 7-Eleven holdup, the wrong time at the gas station or at the bank, could be the kidnapping thing, could just be a mugger, but we're going to talk about those initial few minutes, really up to the first hour, when people are taken, lose their freedom, and are held. And emotionally, it's its own little phase of capture. The first hour is one of the roughest. It's also the section where, for Americans, statistically, where most of us will become hurt or perish from making mistakes. Things that if we hadn't have done, we probably would have survived. So it's a critical time, and we want to cover it. We're going to refer to it as surviving capture, but I want you to keep in your mind, we really are talking about robbery survival here just as much as we are a permanent sense of capture or loss of freedom or arrest. And I'm specifically talking more to the criminal side of this now, not a detention by a government or something like that. We'll cover that in more detail later. The good news is that capture is a very predictable thing. It's acultural. It doesn't matter what culture you're in. A person with a gun or some means of force trying to take another person's freedom away has certain things that they all have in common, certain goals that they all have, certain things you have to meet. You want to get in and take the other person's freedom away before they can run away, before they can hit you or fight back, before they can draw a weapon of their own. I mean, there are certain things that just anybody doing this has to do. And because they're predictable, because that's acultural, we've also studied and learned that on the other side, for victims, there are some very predictable patterns. If you showed an expert video of the first 3 or 4 minutes of a robbery where people are taken prisoner and held in the gas station as shields or whatever, by the way the audience was acting, you could begin to make some pretty good predictions on who's going to come out of this thing without a wound and who's going to get hurt. Because people they make choices how they're going to react to this thing right away. Well, if there are tested and observable patterns on what these perpetrators do, these guys doing the capture, and there are observable patterns on what survivors do and non-survivors do, our point here today is, let's talk about what the survivors do, because that's the part I'd like to emulate. What are the things that people do who survive? What kind of habits did they pull out of their background, their training, their personality, that just tend to be, over time, people who do that tend to come out better. So let's adopt those kinds of habits. Your odds of this occurring to you on a trip are really slim. Could it happen? Yes. So should we talk about it? Yes. The point of this next section is not to scare you, not to think, oh, I can't go, I couldn't face that. You can go. Thousands of people have faced it, and the vast majority survived it. So it's a scary thing, but we've got God on our side, and we've got some strategies that we can develop that would do what we can do to help and be a help to others in that situation. I think the most exciting or interesting part of this is I think traditionally when you watch the movies, the victims are just victims. They don't do anything. You just scream at the right moment and yell. And I'd like to be an extra on a Bruce Willis film, because I mean, that would be cards up. Everybody scream or everybody yell. That's not true. In real life, victims make millions of choices. It's not just do as you're told. Some choose to do the opposite. Some choose to do exactly as they're told. Some would pretend to do as they're told while thinking and doing other things. We can make a difference. As the victim, I can say and do things that do dramatically increase my chances of getting out of this. And I can say and do things that will help you get out of it, or you get out of it. And you can do the same for me by how we behave as a group. We're going to call this, this behavior that we're going to adapt. From the moment that guy puts the gun into the car window to carjack or whatever the situation is, we're going to do this thing called role play. We're going to adapt a role. And we don't want to adapt a role like just acting a little 3-minute routine kind of a thing, because that would be hard to sustain if this turns into weeks or months, okay? And I mean, that's the problem with playing dumb. It's hard to then get smart a week later when you figure out this isn't going to end because, well, you were stupid the first week. Now what's happened, you know? Well, I read the encyclopedia. So it's not a role in the sense of putting on a fake persona. It's more of a role like life roles where, you know, when I was 18, I act like an 18-year-old, and I'm in college, and I have no wife, and I play a role. The role, you study, you eat a lot of pizza, and on your free time, you hang out with your buddies, and nobody gets mad. And then you get married, and your role better change, okay? Or somebody going to change your role for you, okay? And the role changes, and you adapt this new role, and the new role is when I'm through working or doing what I'm doing, I need to come home and be with my loved one, my partner, and we're supposed to function as a team. And if I keep going to pizza with the boys and ignoring her, things aren't going to work. And I've adapted a role. Nobody had to script that for me. You know, and some guys and gals don't adapt it very well, and you know where that's headed. You know, somebody's going to get a rolling pin right upside the head. And who taught us how to play those roles? I mean, we all know how to behave at a funeral or at a wedding, or we know those roles. Our parents, I mean, we saw others do it. We emulated it. My father took me aside and very clearly explained, you want to be successful in a marriage? And he was very specific because he likes my wife better than me. And he said, you know, don't lose this one or you're out of the will, son. He said, here's what you got to do. The friends come second and the wife comes first. I had parental involvement taught me that role. Who teaches people how to play the hostage role? You know, mom and dad never pulled me aside and said, now, son, if you're ever kidnapped, here's the role you want to play. Well, you get that from, most of us, from movies, and that's a dangerous place to get it. So we want to kind of counter what you've seen in the movies. We do want you to adopt a role. It's not play acting. It's not lying. It's more like going to a job interview. I'm just going to put my best assets forward for that situation. That's not deceiving. When I show up at a job interview in a suit and tie, I'm not saying I always wear suits and ties. I'm saying I know how to play the role of a man who wants a job. Please hire me. That's all I'm doing. And that's the kind of role we're going to play here. I think it helps if you remember what a guy, and I'll keep saying guy because like 80–90% of all these people who do the captures are still guys. Women are too nice and smart for this, I guess. But so these guys who do this, they have certain goals in mind. It's always good to know what your opponent's got in mind. First of all, he wants live prisoners. And now we have something to bargain with because we both have something in common. We both want live prisoners, okay? If he didn't, this would not be a kidnapping or a hostage taking. It'd be a shooting, a drive-by. That's different. A guy who blows up a bomb or just sprays bullets at somebody, like we saw here just in the last couple of days, he's got different goals. He's trying to take out lives. This man says, put your hands up, that he wants a live prisoner. So now, we've already got something to work with. I have something he needs, my life, okay? And that's something we can work with. The second one, to keep me alive but not cause him any harm, he needs to do two things to me. First, he needs to control me so I don't fight back or run away. And usually to do that, to prevent me resisting him, he's going to try and intimidate me. Experts will often call this section, this capture section, in the intimidation phase. The capture phase. This is where he proves to me that he's the boss, he's serious. If you mess around, you're going to get pistol whipped or hit. It's why the first few minutes of a robbery are more physically violent or a hijacking or anything, because he's trying to go ahead and establish the fact that you might have better just sit there and mind, because anything else is going to get you hurt. Okay? And some people adopt to that role quicker, and some people are, excuse me, can I go to the bathroom? And they don't catch on right away. This is not the time to stick out. This is not the time to negotiate. This guy wants control. I think it's fair to acknowledge how most of us will feel when that happens. Scared. And if you read the statistics even, a large number, you look at World War II movies and we don't really portray those quite like what real battle is. I was just reading a study on what huge percentage of men their first time in combat soil themselves. that's just normal. People are trying to kill me. There is fear. I think it's fair to acknowledge that when this happens, somebody jumps out of a bush and with a gun or sticks it in the car window, there's going to be fear. There's going to be some paralysis. Some of us are going to go into what's called slow motion. If you've ever been in a car wreck and everything just kind of goes slow motion. I mean, I crashed my dad's favorite motorcycle once, and it seemed like I had like 14 minutes to think through all the things he was going to do to me if I survived this. And fortunately, I was hurt just enough that he felt sorry for me, and the bike thing, that came later, okay? But, it took 5 seconds to crash that motorcycle. Things just slow down. People will say after a robbery, oh, it was like I could see it happening, and I could think through 14 scenarios, and I couldn't do anything. Fear, paralysis, and then the third reaction we often get as human beings is fight or flight. Get up and start swinging or make a run before I even stop and think, well, there's one here pointing a gun. Is there even one outside the door? I'm running right into the second one. Getting up and doing something before I should have, before I've thought it out. Now, we can't teach people not to be afraid. You point a live weapon at me and I still get nervous, okay? You can't teach that out of a person that I know. People can get used to it. I guess depending on where you live and what you do, you could get more used to it, but there's still going to be fear. What we can teach is we can teach people to move and think in spite of fear. We do it all the time with pilots and simulators. Yeah? We teach them when the buzzers go off and the fuel gauge is going and they're going down, you do have the choice to just lay down in the cockpit floor and cry, or you start going through a checklist. In spite of your fear, you do everything you can to save the airplane. Now, I know when I flew down here, I was hoping my pilot was, one of those who's going to go ahead and keep on trying before the plane goes down. That's really what we do in training. We're going to talk through not how to get rid of your fear, not how to put aside natural feelings. We're going to talk through what to do about, in spite of my fear, I will do these things, okay? I mean, really, that's what real courage is.
You are about to hear from Jim Spence, a missionary in Africa. He, along with his family and friends, were victims of an armed robbery that took place in one of their homes. Jim had this training right before the incident occurred. He talks about what happened that night and how the training helped him through the situation.
We all got on the ground. Our teammate yelled back to the back rooms, had told his wife to get on the ground, get the kids on the ground. Like I said, his oldest daughter was next to me, and we were under the table. And I grabbed her and pulled her underneath me. And it would not have been my natural reaction to grab her because it just wouldn't have been. It's just not my personality, but I knew that she needed that. And so the training came to mind. I grabbed her, was able to pull her underneath me and at least hold her and like I'm hugging her. And which actually was probably good for all of us because she was the most distraught and the most disturbed of all of us.
Your role during this capture or this arrest or this detainment, really, I think you need to understand that one of my roles is to understand just how emotional and volatile this guy is. Understand how dangerous the first few minutes are. He doesn't know who's carrying a weapon. He doesn't know who's going to fight back. He doesn't know what your reaction's going to be. He may have psyched himself up. I mean, in a large number of these criminal attacks, he's got some artificial excitement going, alcohol, crack, something, He's not thinking logically the way I am. And it just helps to recognize that because I might have a tendency to want to logic him out of this. And he may not be in a mental frame of mind for logic right now. So I think that's important to recognize his emotional state. And then the next thing I can do for this guy, if I understand that he's all wound up, is help him unwind a little bit. And I can do that in a few other ways. I de-escalate him by maintaining my own composure. A crying baby. Try crying back and see how quickly you calm a crying baby. That's not what you do. So this guy's screaming, he's yelling, he's hollering, and I'm the opposite. I'm moving slow. I'm talking a notch lower than him. In counseling, they always talk a notch lower than the other person, always talk a notch slower than the other person. I help him come down instead of helping him go up. But if he screams and I scream back, that's escalation. And it's just going to get worse. So how I move, how fast I move, my physical posture, we know that a lot of people in a situation where he still feels somewhat threatened, if he can see my hands, will feel better. If he's been trained at all, when my hands are out of sight, there's a problem. He doesn't know what I'm doing because hands can hurt people. So I'll keep my hands out. I would keep them open. I wouldn't even, the pockets isn't, I'd get them out of the pockets and open. I'd give him a posture. If you're taller, we know that in a lot of these cases, this is a good time to be short. You don't want to be taller than the perpetrator because he'll feel more threatened by that. So I want to look small, I want to look humble, and I want to appear to be, I'm trying to follow your instructions. I mean, there could be a language barrier and things like that, and I just need to make it clear. I'm trying to do what you're saying right now. Even if I'm thinking later I might escape or later I might fight back, in the first few minutes I don't have enough information to do most of it. Only in the movies, really. I mean, those things. For most of us in this capture phase, I just need to slow things down. And I should look for chances to escape. I shouldn't just, if the guy says sit there and don't move for 10 minutes, I may sit. The don't move for 10 minutes may be, in my mind, I'm waiting. If he turns and leaves the room, well, he said I can't go for 10 more minutes. I might want to think through, what are my chances? We know that of people who do get away from these incidents, who escape, most of the successful ones were in the first few minutes. Particularly if there's if somebody breaks into a home or something where there's more than one victim and they don't even know how many people they have prisoner right now. I mean, if they ran into this room right now, everybody gets down on the floor and one of you managed to crawl into the shadows or something, the attacker much less likely to notice somebody missing now than 2 days later when he's got us named and numbered and tied up. And so I'd always be thinking about escape. Now, I don't know if I'm going to have that opportunity, but I'd be thinking about it because it's a good way to remind myself he can take away everything but my freedom to think. And we know that people who think that way suffer less. When this is all over, even if I didn't escape, I will feel less victimized because I maintain control of my thought process. And I'll tell stories. Well, I could have escaped one more move, Whatever that comes out as, there's a lot of truth in that. Versus the person that, I was just paralyzed. I feel like a failure. I hope I can do that again someday and see if I could do better, I mean, those are the extremes on this one. In a hijacking, again, it's just, a 1 in a million chance that's going to happen, but there are a couple specific advices we give on a bus jacking or a hijacking. Everything I've said about tension just triples when you put us in a small space. If you don't believe me, do a 12-hour overseas flight with a crying baby next to you. Okay? Noise, irritation, it all goes up when we're all trapped in a little space. And in a hijacking, it's going to be more tense. I would delay in a hijacking being singled out. I would delay being identified as whatever they're looking for. And they'll often get on the speaker initially and they want all Americans raise your hands, all Christians, all Jews, whatever they're looking for. I don't want to be that. I would delay being singled out. Even if I know I got a blue passport sitting right above me in the carry-on, I don't go, oh, pick me, pick me. I think I'm going to slow down. Even if it's an hour goes by before they figure out and they grab that passport and they say, you're an American. Why didn't you raise your hand while ago? I would rather say I was scared, I didn't understand, I didn't know what you meant. I would rather do that because my odds of surviving an hour later are much greater than if I volunteer to be what they're after in the first few minutes. So don't get yourself singled out in a hijacking. You can do that with what you say, you can do it with your composure. The loudest, most crying, most noisy person. And historically, ladies can get away with a little more sobbing on an airplane, but we've seen some instances where a man was singled out and shot probably because he was simply displaying too much emotion for the machismo attitude of the terrorist. So I wouldn't show a lot of emotion. You're going to be scared, and you're going to, obviously, if you're normal. But even crying, I would keep that quiet, and I'd reach out to the person next to me. That's what one of my students was able to do in a home invasion here recently in Africa. He was doing okay. The young lady next to him wasn't. Now it takes courage to calm yourself. It takes heroism to reach out and take a little risk and say, let me help you because you're drawing attention to us over here, okay? And if it's on an airplane and the guy next to me is throwing a fit, I may just want to conk him on the head. Yeah, shut up before you get us killed. But whatever you got to do, we need to help this hijacker calm down and feel in control, even though we're really controlling it by choosing to do those things. Avoid eye contact in close spaces. On hijacking or a bus jacking, eye contact sort of says, I'm thinking about jumping you, or I'm thinking about resisting. It says I'm defying you. Particularly for ladies in most cultures, but even for us guys. I would not look a guy in the eye during the first few parts of a capture. Later, when I'm humanizing, he needs to look me in the eye, but not in the first part. I want to keep a low profile. That'd be an important thing. I don't want to stand out. In those Bruce Willis movies, you know, there's always the guy who brings attention to himself. And you know what? In the Bruce Willis movies, he usually dies. I think that's a good example, something we don't want to do. Now, this one other topic I want to cover. What about physical abuse during this capture? The guy who thinks he needs to pistol whip or hit or shoot or wound or hurt people to make them comply. I want to make that unnecessary. So I'm outwardly compliant. Hey, I'm doing what you said, you got my car, you got my wallet. I'm talking like you're in control, mister, because that's what he wants. Remember we said initially he wants control so he doesn't feel threatened. I'm implying that he's got control by giving him and handing him all of those things. And then the second thing, if the violence continues, now he wants information from me. Where's the rest of the money? What are you hiding from me? When that kind of thing continues, I don't want to make that productive. Every time you hit me, I talk faster. Every time you scare me, I answer more. What's that going to get from him? More hitting and more scaring. What I want to do is turn that on. Now, I also wouldn't turn into the, sir, I don't feel like talking to you when you hit me, okay? That probably isn't going to fly with a criminal. I would just turn it into a, sir, when you're hitting me, I can't think, I can't help you. You, sir, are interfering with your own process here. Because when you hit, I'm not used to being hit. You know, I'm not, you know, that's not part of my culture. That's, if we could calm down and you could just explain what you want, then I could try to answer. Those are how you talk a guy out of violence, as opposed to, you can hit me all you want, I won't talk. Or, when you hit me, I get scared and talk faster. Those both encourage more violence. So make it non-productive for him, specifically. Okay? That covers the average physical violence.
David is about to walk you through a simulated capture. Listen to him as he points out some of the positive and negative responses that people had during the simulation.
In a situation like this, when shots are fired, it's